Hi everyone, today we're going to take a quick look at some of the common issues you have when sharpening bowl or spindle gouges. Most people talk about how important a sharp edge is, but actually what's equally important is the shape of the cutting edge. So let's take a closer look. So if you take, for example, this gouge here, this is a 5/8 inch gouge sharpened to 55 degrees on the tip, but you'll notice the way the side wing has dipped down there. There's a concave curve. Now this doesn't really work very well when making shear cuts. So even though it's sharp, it's hard to get that in to meet the wood exactly the way I want to meet it. And also less effective with shear scraping. So it would rough shape a bowl, it would hollow out a bowl, it would finish a bowl, but not in the way I would want it to do so. If you take, for example, this one over here, so this is exactly the same diameter bar, exactly the same jig setting, and actually exactly the same amount of time when it comes to sharpening. So the top one has a convex curve. So the reason that has happened is the one here is actually a U-shaped flute. And one of the issues with a U-shaped flute, or less so with a V-shape, but also an issue, is that the geometry of the flute does not really work in harmony with the movements of the jig. The parabolic flute is much easier to consistently sharpen well. And that's because the flute has a gentle curve on the side walls rather than straight walls. You can also run into issues when sharpening the parabolic flute, getting dipping on the side wings, and that happens mostly because of pushing too hard and staying in the same place for too long. But it also is affected by how far you rotate that tool. First, we're going to take a look at the Tormek and some of the little steps you can take to avoid the side wings from dipping down. I have the Tormek T8 here ready to go. It's fitted with a 600 grit diamond wheel and a composite wheel for honing the tools afterwards on the left hand side. So normally these grinders come as standard with a leather honing wheel. This is a composite wheel, so that means that I don't have to use the honing compound on it each time, and it's a little less messy. So the first step is to set the distance of this universal support. And for that, I use this guy here, which is the turning tool setter. So I've put some black marker on these two wheels here, and I use hole A. So when I slide this on and bring it into the right position, the two aluminium wheels there at the front should rotate, which they're doing. And then I can lock the thumb screws into place. But what I've actually done here, just to make things that little bit faster, I've designated this universal support for my turning tools. So I've set this locking collar with thread lock. So that means it no longer adjusts, but I do have a spare one for sharpening my other woodworking tools. And I've put this loose fitting collar on it. And the reason for that is that when I'm sharpening my tools on this wheel, it measures 10 inches in diameter. And then when I go to the other wheel, the honing wheel, this one only measures 8 inches. So by removing that, I don't have to use the TTS 100 to set the distance. I can just quickly hone and just go back then to sharpening the next time around. So it means that I'm only spending seconds really when it comes to sharpening. So we'll just pop that in place. The next thing I want to talk about is avoiding the concave shape appearing on the side wings of the swept back tools. So first of all, we'll take a look at the 5/8 inch bowl gouge, the 16mm diameter bar. And I'm just going to quickly set the protrusion for that. Just lock that in place. And this one here, it's quite straightforward. When I'm sharpening, I'm going to start here resting on the bar, and then I finish resting on the bar at the other side. And it will not develop a concave going from this point to this point, provided I don't push hard and stay in the same position for a long time on the wheel. So I'm going to push down here, rock back and forward on the sides, quickly over the top, and then the same on the other side. Now, if your jig does not have this resting point either side of the tool when it comes down, what can happen is the tool rotates further. And that means the jig is likely to contact the wheel, but also it means that the side wings on the tool become inverted and it starts to turn the wings inwards, which really is not ideal. So the first thing I'm going to do with this tool here is I'll just get my fingernail inside on the flute and just pull and just listen. So my nail is catching on a burr, and that means I've taken off enough material for this tool to be sharp. I normally don't hone tools that are going to be used when rough shaping bowls because the heavy cuts will just take off that burr. So what I'm going to do now is just go to the next tool. So again, I set the protrusion. The jig is set to a different position now this time, but what I'm going to do is slide these little spacers on in front and behind the tool, and that will limit how far this tool turns, avoiding a concave side wing on the smaller diameter tool. So when I push down here, it hits that spacer, goes to the other side, does the same, and then I'm just going to check quickly with my fingernail. Again, it's catching that burr. I can hear it as I pull off the edge. So that really is enough when it comes to sharpening this tool. And to hone it then, let me just put the tool down for a second. All I need to do is take this guy off, remove that spacer. That brings it a little closer. And then just give it a few passes on the other side. So I'm pushing in quite firmly here. This time I don't need the spacers because I can't change the shape of the tool with that honing wheel. And then when that's finished, we'll turn that tool upside down and just push firmly down on the leather honing wheel. And that is it, ready to go. So to put this back in place, I just put the spacer on again, slide it in here, and I'm ready now for the next tool. Whenever I'm sharpening the smaller 3/8 inch bowl gouge, I'll use the larger spacers instead of these other two. So I'll place that here in front, then the other one behind, and then this tool does not need to be rotated as far to sharpen it correctly. And when I want to sharpen the second bevel, I loosen the collar, slide the tool up, and then focus on the heel. And this is what it looks like. So it's very easy to maintain a perfect cutting edge on all of these tools. So I'm reaching down for the GL6, so this is the bottom bowl gouge. And notice with this jig, it is more closed in than the other tools that I use. So it's important as I go between different tools that I change the position on the jig so that the length of the wings on the tools are exactly what I'm looking for. So a long wing for rough shaping or shear scraping, a shorter wing for shear cuts, fine cuts on the outside of the bowl, and then a very short wing when it comes to the bottom bowl gouge. And if your jig does not adjust with the different number settings in the same way that this one does, then you will be limited to the shapes you can put on your cutting edges. So with this, I'm going to set a shorter protrusion again, 40 millimeters. And because it's a 16 millimeter tool, then I'm just going to rotate, resting on the bar to start with, all the way over to the other side until it hits the bar again, and then back one more time. And let's just check on that. So I'll put my fingernail in. So it's catching on a burr. Same on the other side, so I know that's now sharp. And then I'll quickly change over the universal support again to the other side. This tool is going to be used for a finishing cut, so I will hone. And starting resting on the bar, over to the other side. And now again, we'll just take off the burr from the flute on the inside. So I push down, push in from the sides, push in from the other side, And it's no harm leaving the universal support here because it prevents you from lifting the tool up, which will quickly round over that edge. So it's a good habit to get into in order to maintain the sharpness of the tool and not round over the edge. So this tool is sharp and ready to go. If you own sharpening systems such as the Robert Sorby Pro Edge, the woodcut or the one-way, you will really see the benefit of being able to adjust the jig head. This gives so much flexibility when it comes to sharpening and getting exactly the right cutting edge profile. The one thing that will take some time to get right is how far to rotate the tool. But know that if your jig hits the wheel, that's always too far. I find that honing the tools is really worth the effort when it comes to finishing cuts, especially shear cuts. And the reason for that is that the cut is so light that any burr left over from the sharpening doesn't get removed. If you don't own a honing wheel, then a DMT fine diamond file works extremely well. I just give it a quick pass each side to remove the burr, and then on the outside, once the bevel makes contact with the wood, the burr just falls away. One of the things that causes quite a bit of confusion around bowl gouges is actually how we measure them. So for example, in America, they measure the outside bar diameter. So if I take this one, for example, here, and we'll just put the calipers on it, we'll get it in focus, you can see that that's measuring 16 millimeters, which is 5/8 of an inch. But in England, what they do is they measure from the inside of the flute to the outside of the bar on the other side. I think it's fair to ask the question, why are there different ways of measuring bowl gouges depending on where they're made? And perhaps this tool will help you understand the answer to that. So this is a very old bowl gouge made by Robert Sorby in Sheffield, probably back in the 50s or 60s. And it's a rectangular section of steel, and instead of being milled, it would have been forged into shape. What you'll notice with this tool is that the outside is not consistent, so it tapers from the top all the way back to here. So for example, this is a 1/2 inch bowl gouge, and the measurement of a 1/2 inch would have been taken from this end rather than somewhere along the middle of the tool. And the newer tools are made from a round bar and the flute is milled out, so the outside is always going to be consistent. If you'd like to sharpen your tools using my preferred jig settings, you can download these sharpening charts for 4 of the most common sharpening jigs out there. We have them for the Tormek, the one-way vari-grind, the woodcut, and the old version jig of the Robert Sorby Pro Edge. If you do own the Robert Sorby Pro Edge and you'd like to follow my sharpening chart, then there's a very simple workaround. So first of all, let's open up to the right page here. This is the Robert Sorby. This is the older version jig. So this had an adjustable head with numbers on the side. And then this little ring here was adjustable as well. But this is actually a stripped down old version Tormek jig. And if I just put that away for a moment, pick this up, and this is a new Tormek jig. So in the same way we can strip that down, we can take off this collar, take off the sleeve is now redundant, and all we need to do then with the collar is remove the thumb screw and replace that with a simple grub screw. If I can do it without actually dropping it on the ground, I'll be doing well. And then this slides on here. Here we go. So you'll notice on the jig it also has a series of numbers here. So for the Robert Sorby, there's 4 adjustments that need to be made, and the extra one is down here. So choosing either the number 1, the number 2, or the number 3 setting. And then you'll have all the advantages of a head that adjusts with the numbers here below. And what I really like about the Tormek jig is that it has a ball and spring inside, so it'll click firmly into each place, meaning that setting will be exactly right the next time. If you'd like to see how I sharpen my tools on these sharpening systems, check out my sharpening techniques video available to download from our website.